Okay, it looked like the video recorded, and I'm working on this stupid computer. It took me half an hour to turn this computer on, and it was taking so long that I ended up getting distracted on my Chromebook, and then I ended up just spending like 2 hours posting stuff. I found DXM or something like that. I don't know. I've never heard of that band before. But you know, I'm aware that I'm picking up on like this So Solid crew. They were seen as gangsters. They were seen as sort of, I guess, gun crime warriors. And you know, I know that if you're a politician in one of those courtrooms, you'll probably look at DXM, and I've only seen 2 songs of his though. I'm going to go more. I'm going to do more. I'm going to look at more. But I feel like these singers can teach me things, and even if their work is sick and gross, I feel like I can still learn from it, or I can use them as an example. You know, and seeing that DXM or something like that, MDX or whatever. If seeing him made me think that there are a lot of people that would probably come off as gangster and hardcore, and maybe they talk about murder and gun violence and stuff like this, but I feel like there is 2 different types of now that you know that there is really bad people in this world. You know, if there's people that think it's fine to break their kid's arm in front of an assembly to try and teach disobedience to their school, I mean, this is terrible, this is horrible. You know, if there's people that tell their wives that they can't leave the house because they're going to get breast cancer if they do, you know, this is controlling, and this is disgusting behavior. And you know, if people go missing and their wives don't care, it's because of their behavior. And sometimes it would be easy to just be like, oh no, it's the wife's fault, the wife didn't like the husband. Yeah, or maybe the wife had a reason for not liking the husband. You know, I have heard, was it the last woman who was killed by a death sentence in England, killed her husband through poisoning and stuff. And I'm just thinking, well, that's a silly reason to die. So if someone's killed their husband through poisoning, okay, it might be that the husband was a generally nice person, or maybe the husband was a controlling bastard who wouldn't let her leave, and she felt like trapped for a very, very long time, and again, killing him seemed to be the only answer, because then she could get the house and she can get rid of the monster that's causing her problems. You know, I understand that sometimes killing people is a bad thing, but sometimes if people are bad, they deserve to die. You know, why put someone in prison for 20 years if you know that all they ever did was cause problems for the community? You know, you're spending money on helping bad people rather than spending money on helping good people have a better life. You know, there are plenty of people that don't want to turn to crime but feel they have to because they've got a starving kid at home, you know, or they feel that they need the money. You know, sometimes people turn to crime because they are genuinely poor and don't need the money, and need the money, but other times it can be that they need the money, or so other times it can be that they don't need the money, and therefore they turn to crime, and they actually enjoy it. They like the thrill, they like the violence, they like the excitement of getting richer and knowing that they've got more and more wealth and that they've got more and more power because of it. And this is corrupt. And you know, there's 2 different types of gangsters, and I think a good way of telling the difference between a good gangster and a bad gangster is, as a good gangster looks after its pets, a good gangster looks after its people, a good gangster, you know, treats women with respect, although some women do like being dominated and some men like to dominate, and I don't think that should be seen as a bad thing. Some guys like to fight and other guys like to fight too. So you know, I noticed that in that interview with Tommy Robinson, there was the interviews were saying, well, you like violence, you admitted to actually liking a punch up, so how do we know you're not one of these bad people that, you know, genuinely deserve to be in jail because they're a threat to others? Or, you know, there's a difference between liking a punch up because you're punching them, they're punching you, and okay, it's not really arranged and you don't really know who these people are, but you know, I can understand that there's something nice about having a punch up in a street, if it doesn't amount to, you know, them bringing out a knife and them stabbing you. You know, as soon as you start bringing up the game and you start bringing out knives or, you know, something that can actually cause real long-term damage, you know, a stab wound will be there for the rest of your life basically, or at least 7 to 10 years. You know, you will see that scar, and therefore it becomes different when people start feeling like they need to up the standards. You know, if it's 10 against 1 or 10 against 2 even, you know, that's really bad, because one could be knocked out, passed out, and then the other you could just be attacking, and you know, this is completely unfair. And it's just, You need to recognize as a person what's the difference between a good gangster and a bad gangster. You need to recognize the difference between someone that likes to have a punch up and someone that likes to bring out a knife during a punch up so they can win the fight. These are two different types of people, and they shouldn't be classed as being the same person. And I've come across this DXM who as I don't know, but the two songs that I've seen so far, I feel like it's representing the bad type of gangster, the one that you should avoid, the one that's not cool. So Solid Crew. I like the beep 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 and the sort of happiness about it, whilst also being scary, whilst also being ghetto. I like the fact that there's a woman in it as well, and the woman seems to be very in favour. In that song, I noticed that Romeo actually talks about wanting to chase girls, but then you see him actually chasing the girl, Christina Miliana, who is Angel of Bliss, and that's a completely fine girl to chase after because you want bliss. Ignorance is bliss, and I feel like that song is about the ignorance that people will know towards this sort of Islamic war that's going on. People who choose Islam are not all bad people, because I know that Islam needs to be something that people are happy to choose. Now, if there are some good people choosing it, then the bad ones can hide behind the good ones, and they know that, so they won't feel any threat in saying that or being proud of being Islamic. But by being Islamic, you should see them as a threat because they have chosen to believe in a bunch of things that I don't agree with. Now, you're not a bad person if you think the world was made in 6 days. You're a stupid person, but you need to tell the difference between a stupid Muslim or an ignorant Muslim and a Muslim that genuinely thinks, Muhammad is someone you should die for. Because if most of the people who worship, Islamic, if most of the people who worship the inverted religion are called Muhammad and people are willing to die for Muhammad, then I think that's just a sign that they've chosen that side, even if they're not very Muslim, even if they're not very, there's a lot of people called Muhammad, but a lot of these people are not on my side. Some of them might be. So I know you shouldn't judge by their looks or their appearance or their name even, but I feel like it might be a slight hint. Some people might even be called Muhammad just to try and make a statement of something. I think Muhammad DS is called that because he was actually Muhammad in the past, but I'm seeing those two people as being very different people. In your first life, everyone is corrupt, bad, and like Muhammad was 1,500 years ago or whatever. A lot of people believed that. So what I did was I took someone who was living their first life as a human that back then, and whatever the truth was, I don't know. I mean, the truth might have been that he married a 12-year-old, but the stories got changed to make it seem younger because maybe the people who were writing the stories either liked the idea of marrying 9-year-olds, they wanted younger and hotter, so let's make the woman more attractive by saying she was 9 rather than 12. You don't know what the truth is. I don't know what the truth is, but what people believe is part of the truth, because that's what they want to believe. If you want to believe, that he married her when she was 3, then that just shows that you probably have an attraction towards 3-year-olds, and you yourself want to marry a 3-year-old. So, people have shaped Muhammad and this character into something they like. And if you are a person who's called your child Muhammad, I feel like you have done that because you have. Maybe you don't know anything. Okay, maybe you don't know anything about Muhammad, and you just have heard all the good stories or whatever, and maybe you don't. But there's good and bad. If every single person called Muhammad was bad, then people would know to change their name, and they would change their name, and you won't know what they're called. So you need to make it clear that people think there's nothing wrong. I've heard Nigel Farage seem to be in favour. He's been a bit shifty, like yes, no, and I think he doesn't know what he should. I think he should be seen as someone who doesn't want to upset the Muslims. You don't have to be on their side, but you have to make it clear that you don't want to lose the voting thing. So you are happy to be on their side for that reason. If they think that about you, then it'll be fine. But yeah, really, I think there is a hidden war going on. One that just seems to be getting darker. That girl who I thought was Angel of the Taxi, who might still be the Angel of the Taxi, because I feel like a taxi is just something I don't use. So me calling her that could actually just be me saying something that I don't use. But I found this DMX guy because she had a song called "What's My Name," and I was just thinking, Angel of the Taxi. That's that's or Angel of the Transporters. That's not really an impressive name. Why are you going on about this? But I don't know. I was wondering if she's maybe like, if she's got a negative name of Angel of Muhammad. And what's my name? Muhammad. That's what her name is, like something linking to that. You know, if she's got two names. Some of the songs seem to link to the taxi or transportation of drugs or body parts or bodies or sex trafficking. You know, she seems to have some very dark songs, and I do not like them, so I do not want to show that I like them. But at the same time, the singers are not there to be liked. They're there to teach and there to learn. And if there are some singers that I just really don't relate to, you know, I feel like this might be done deliberately so that, you know, people who do relate them, well, they'll be linking to people that I really don't relate to. Hence, it's likely that I don't relate to them. If you relate to this girl, I don't think you relate to me, because I really didn't like her work. I thought it was way too dark, but I did like that the anxiety song. Although I don't actually face anxiety. For me, anxiety is rare. I've got some sort of demon that lives inside different people's spirits, or lives inside different people's brains, should I say, and it's getting them to avoid me. So I feel like I can't really feel anxiety, because I don't know what I'm fighting against. Like, on one hand, I want to be on the good side, but on the same side, I feel like the whole world wants to be on the bad side. Hence, why they're giving huge amounts of money to keep prisoners alive. You know, let's keep them in jail for 20 years. I mean, how much is that going to cost the taxpayer? Do you realize that having so many people in jail is only going to mean that you can't put other people in jail? Now, if these people are no longer a threat because they've been in jail for a couple of years and they're now like, they don't want to stay in prison, they don't want to do this, you know, if they're no longer a threat to society, then why are you continuously housing them for a mistake they made, when there's other people that are actually committing regular crimes? You know, you need to start either having less sentences so that more people can come in, or you need to start implementing the death sentence on anyone that has a long sentence, and anyone who deserves death because they genuinely take pleasure from hurting others. You know, it's one thing to be the So Solid crew and just be like, you know what, these people are bad, they're bad people in the world, I'm happy to go in there and shoot them while they're sleeping. You know, it's one thing to be like that. It is gun violence, it is promoting murder, it's a bad thing, but at the same time, it doesn't cause any pain. And if you're doing it solely because you know these people belong in jail for the next 20 years, but you don't have the taxpayers' money, you know, tell them this. Tell the people of this secret army that these people have done this, A, B, and C. We've got it on camera. We know it's the truth. We don't need to have a trial because we've actually got the footage of it. So there's no point of that. What is the point of spending taxpayers' money on a trial when we've got the evidence that this is the truth? You know, you needed trials in the past because you didn't have the evidence. But if you've got the forensic detectives, if you know that 7 people have raped a 14-year-old and you've got the DNA evidence of it, you know, even if it was consenting, if you've got the DNA of it, you know that their dicks went inside this girl and this girl is not of age. So why the hell would you spend huge amounts of money keeping them in jail for such a long time when they are happy to take advantage of a kid? And it's just like, well, why would you not just kill them? Like, if the world was different, you know, if there was only a couple of these people, you know, when I was a kid, I used to watch these forensic detectives all the time, but they told me that it was like there were 69 active serial killers at every single year. But I was kind of thinking, well, there's billions of people here, so 69 a year, you know, just kill the bad eggs, put them in prison, it's fine. I didn't think the world was that bad. I didn't realize that actually that's just like a tip of the iceberg. I don't know. I'm sure I heard 66 serial killers at one time, but some of these people, you know, they have 10-year breaks and then they start up again. But yeah, if there's like 100 serial killers, you know, that's easy. But if you're not dealing with that, if you're dealing with huge amounts of people that walk around with knives because they want to attack any non-Muslim, you know, this is a massive threat to society, and we cannot just put them in prison or send them back to their own country because they'll find a way here. So murder is the only way. Now, if you find people who promote gun violence because they know of the dangers, you know, there's a lot of people that have had such a horrible upbringing, or, you know, they've been brought up in the ghettos, they know what it's like to fear and live with others. You know, if you get them but find good people and say, you know what, these people have done bad and we need to put them in prison for a long time, but what would you rather spend money on? Spend you know, £100,000 imprisoning this person for a long time, or would you rather just get the money yourself? And I don't know how much you would pay them to go in and just do this, but, you know, if they're doing it to defend their country, then they would do it, and they shouldn't feel bad about doing it. And I think, though, you do need to recognize that there are some people that might turn on the government. They might think, you know what, I'm gonna support the Muslims, and I'm gonna give them a heads up, and I'm gonna tell them. So you need to make sure that whoever is in this sort of secret army does not favor the Islamic beliefs in any way, and they have to be real, like people who are generally on the right side. And I think people who like animals is a good way of saying the difference between the gangsters and the bad gangsters. You know, if you're happy to watch animals suffer, or if you take enjoyment from seeing, you know, I don't even like watching. My mum would always watch the David Attenborough and all the sort of nature and stuff. And okay, you can learn some interesting stuff. You know, what he said about the bats was very interesting, that they can like freeze and live in very icy cold things because their heart rate goes down to about 4 beats a minute or something. You know, you know, there's some very interesting things you can learn, and when you see how cute some of these animals are and giving birth and stuff like this. But yeah, there's a downside to it, which is watching other animals kill. Now, I don't like that side of it, hence why I don't like watching the show. But if you're someone that likes watching that show because you like seeing animals being killed and ripping each other apart in a violent way, you know, this is a bad sign that you're not on the right side. So you know, I want Islamists to be attacked and go, because they want to attack others. Only they're trying to hide behind the good Muslims so that they seem like, you know, they too are a good Muslim. But yeah, but in that same way, I think there's atheistic gangsters that like to hide behind, yeah, I'm a gangster too, you know, I'm a typical rapper, I'm like Diddy and stuff, and but I think they're really like so much worse, and yes, so I just want to say all that.